Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sue Carrick, and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sue Carrick, and it's lovely to have you join me. Now, my guest today is Australian-born, New York-based vocalist and pianist Tracy Yarad. Tracy went through a traumatic experience when her husband left her, and for a much younger woman, and gradually she picked up the pieces of her shattered life to bring that backstory to a one-woman musical memoir. Now, Tracy had a top 40 hit in the 1990s, and her memoir provides several deeply personal and emotionally resonant original songs drawn from her experience. You'll hear about the couple's experience as a travelling, juggling and music duo, the gruelling but star-studded life of working in a cover band in five-star Tokyo hotels, to running her own music school in the Blue Mountains in Australia. In the aftermath of the divorce, Tracy started again in her 50s, leaving Australia and travelling the world as a solo musician for the first time. However, it was settling in New York, a move that brought about a transformative change in her life that truly helped to restore her. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Tracy. It's lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue, on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Yes. Now, I received an email from a gentleman who was organising the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and he sent me details of you and your story and your one-woman show. And I thought, I haven't had anyone like this on the show before, and your story is... it's not always been great, but it's good now. And I think your experience is something that I wanted to share with other women who may be going through something similar. So let's start with a little bit about your background and, what you've been doing in life, and sharing that with the audience.
So I grew up in Australia. I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I was born in Taree and I grew up there, northern New South Wales, and went to school there and always knew that I wanted to be a musician. So when I finished school, I ended up in Sydney at the Conservatorium in Sydney studying German lieder and classical singing and classical piano. And I didn't end up working in that field. I mean, I teach music, but I ended up in rock bands, and I don't know how I got there, but that led me to having a really full life, touring all around Australia for many years with original music bands, with some amazing Australian musicians, and supporting international acts and big Australian acts like Tommy Emmanuel and James Blundell and people like that, Sharon O'Neill. We were always on the road, and I, during that time, I skipped a bit because you don't want to get the whole life history, but during that time I was very deeply into a meditation called Raja Yoga meditation, and I spent 7 years living a very strict lifestyle of vegetarianism and no drugs, no alcohol, no onion, no garlic, no sex. So I spent a really long time doing that. And I was touring, I was on the road surrounded by men. And eventually, the drummer who was in my band and I were very close friends, and his wife left him. And he and I started to see each other, and it led me out of that really, I could call it monastic lifestyle, into relationship. And I had been married previously, but when I went into this relationship after 7 years of nothing, it really felt like I had met this soulmate, and I was ready to spend the rest of my life with someone, being the second time round. And he and I worked together as musicians. We kept on with our band, and then we moved to Japan for another 7 years, working in Hilton's, and we were very tight and a wonderful couple. I don't know how far you wanted me to go, but I'll stop there for a minute.
So everything was going well, and you know, up until that point, you've had a very interesting life, and going from extremes, from the classical training that you had, joining a rock band, and then living that very strict lifestyle. What actually prompted you to do that?
So I was married when I was 21, and it was fairly turbulent, let's say. There was a lot of low cloud cover, and it was, always really bumpy. And he was much older than I was, 17 years older, and he was crazy, this man. He was a beautiful man, and he's passed away now, but he had a big drinking and drug problem, and I was quite young and
Mm,
came out of Tari. I felt like I need to do something really different with my life. I feel like I'm not meant for a relationship. And I was living in the
right.
Sydney Northern Beaches, and there was meditation classes, and a friend of mine said, why don't you go and do meditation? And I thought this might help me to get through this, the breakup I'd had with him, and a second breakup of somebody after that husband. I went, no, I'm not meant to be with anyone. So I went into this thing where I learned to meditate, and all of the principles that were a part of this group were detachment and learning who you were on your own, like,
Mm,
not being in relationship, and just letting go of past. And that's what sent me there. It was 2 failed relationships. It's like, no,
mm.
can't do it. Maybe I'm meant to just be with God. And I was wearing a white sari every day, and I was extremely happy and content in that lifestyle, because it was a very intensive way to learn how to truly walk through the world by myself and feel like I was happy without everything else that normal people my age were doing. I was 26 when I started
Mm.
that meditation thing, and I completely, announced everything. So,
Yes.
except my
Yeah.
music, I kept on playing.
Yes, but going through that would have made you stronger, because most people have a fear of being on their own. They fear that,
Yeah.
I need to have someone in my life. I can't, I need to be in a partnership. And sometimes it's just not working, and you need to go through that discovery or self-discovery, and you've obviously come out of that a much stronger person. And at 26, that's still a baby, really, isn't it, these days? Well, I can say that
Yeah.
because I'm 67. So, 26 to me, when I look back, when I was 26, I had 2 children, and I was in my first marriage, and I with an older man. And when I look back, I think, oh my God, I was so naive then. So I think, that would have been a very enriching experience for you. And I actually admire you for being so strict for that period of time, with all that, the things that you sort of spurned. So let's come
Yeah.
forward. You've met your soulmate, And a lot of us do feel we've done that with our second time round, and for some of us it is. But tell me a bit about your story from there. You were going along, everything seemed to be perfect from what you were saying, and then what happened?
Yeah, well, it was a great marriage. We were really equals in that marriage. We were both strong people. We both had our talents and our creative input into our marriage as well as into our outside life. So we spent the 7 years in Japan as hotel musicians working for Hilton's, and it was grueling, really hard work. We were working 6 nights a week, 6 shows a night. We were saving money. We'd never saved more than $2,000 being touring musicians in Australia. But there we could save up to $20,000 every 6 months. So we got on this circuit with the Hiltons, and we were socking it away and saving it all up. And we ended up buying a house, the first little house we bought in the Blue Mountains. And we took it from there. Then we started a music school. We both wanted to do the same things. It was amazing. We played music together. We were both vegetarian. We understood each other on so many very deep levels. And we wanted to go back to Australia after our Japan stint. And we both wanted to have a school that was something really unusual in a small community where we could change young people's lives and really offer them something that perhaps a normal private music lessons don't offer. So we worked so hard at that, buying houses and selling houses, and then setting up a school in one of those houses, eventually in a big house where we had up to 10 teachers and up to 280 students coming through a week. And that school became our dream. It was exactly our vision, where these kids were in our community and we were like mentors for all these young children. And we didn't just teach them music, we put them in bands. We'd have camps every year. They'd come and we'd have intensive things when we'd invite amazing musicians that we knew that we'd worked with over the years would come up to the mountains and take workshops. And it was a hub for music. And in Katoomba, it was very, very well received, and the community adored both of us. So that's where we got to. But it was very hard work because we put our own careers aside, and probably renovating and trying to get ahead and trying to earn money, it puts so much pressure onto a partnership, a marriage, if you're not completely focusing on the fun side of your marriage. You can't completely focus on. I often think that if I was to go back in time, which I don't wish to, but if I was to go back in time, that balance of making sure that you're nurturing your private, intimate time with your husband is really important, instead of slogging away at work relentlessly.
Yes, and I think the thing too is that you both were together all the time, and it was just work, 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 which even though you enjoyed the school and what you were doing, and it would have been very rewarding, there was no break away from that, or even your individual interests or things like that. So it would have, put a lot of pressure onto you, because once you make that commitment, people are, relying on you, and you wanted to make the business different. So it just can't happen without that effort. So something has to give.
Yeah. Something gave.
So would you like to share what happened then, and then we can move on to the more positive side of the interview?
Yeah. So I truly don't really understand how it happened, but we had so many children around us and we never had any kids of our own. And we tried very hard to have kids. But there were reasons why that didn't happen, and all of that is revealed in my show, all these pretty things, but why we didn't have children. But we had so many children around us, and we had a lot of godchildren. We had 11 children. Everyone wanted to make us godparents. Like, let's have Tracy and as godparents. And we had so many kids, and we had kids coming into the school, and they'd want to hang out with us. You know, we'd take them to the city to see the amazing jazz musicians that were coming into town, and you know, they'd hang out and they'd think, oh, it's so cool. And we get them up on stage to sing with us if they were ready, or to play drums or whatever. And so there were a lot of kids around us, and a couple of siblings came to the school really young, 7 and 5 when they first came, and they started to become like little sidekicks, like our little kids that would hang around with us a lot. And their mum was single and working very hard, so we started to spend a lot of time with these 2 girls. But the older one in particular really adored us. And to cut the story short, we met her around 7, and she'd always come. We take her on holidays. We do all sorts of things with her. She was like a child that we couldn't have. And she was going through her HSC, and she really wanted to be out of home because her mum was single and dating, and this girl felt distracted. So we said, you know, sure, you can come and stay with us. So she moved into our home. And lo and behold, I felt something strange happening. I saw my ex starting to make changes with his physical appearance, things that you know are warnings, like extra exercise, more push-ups, hair color changes, wanting to get the teeth whitened, just so many things that were not a part of his priorities before that. And it was really unexpected for me that he ended up having an affair with this girl who was she'd just turned 18. She was living in the house. So that's what happened. And unfortunately, because we were mentors and there were so many local people that knew us, that when he decided that he was going to go forward with this relationship and leave me because she became pregnant, the whole community found out about it, and the whole marriage just blew up. There was no way that, you know, I could repair it, the marriage. It was just way too off the charts and out of the ordinary. It was like, who is this person that he would be capable of turning around and having an affair, or having a relationship, not an affair, with someone that he carried on his shoulders as a 7-year-old girl. And someone that was
and the other thing is, as you say, Katoomba is a small community. It's a beautiful community, and I can see why you chose there, because it's a creative hub. You have artists and, you know, musicians and so forth, and actors. They all tend to gravitate there. So you would have not only had to cope with what was happening, but also in the court of public opinion as well, because everyone, it's hard to keep that sort of quiet, and so sometimes it's not even in your control. So that must have been so devastating for you. So how did you actually get past that?
Friends, family, and a dog. You know, I honestly, I felt like that was the end for me. That you feel so desperate. I felt really desperate. I felt that I could have not moved forward, that I could have let myself fall into the abyss of what the Blue Mountains is on a morning walk. So easy to just, you know, I didn't want to commit suicide, but it was that feeling of that everything had exploded, and that if I didn't for example, get myself an animal that I could swing between never getting up out of bed and pulling the covers over me. It was so devastating that it was 23 years we were together, and you think that you're in a forever, you are forever, and then all of a sudden you have been cast aside like that. It's really hard. So I got my border collie, and she made me, then I had to get up because I had to go walking, and I started to just engage in life again. And I had incredible, and as you say, the community of the Blue Mountains is so incredibly supportive and beautiful people. And my friends up there were all like, they all cared for me. They all came around me, and each person played a different role, but everyone looked after me. It was overwhelming, and how humbling it was, the feeling of humanity that they helped me through. They helped me through it until I was strong enough to pack a bag and get on a plane, because my sister said, you've got to go away and do something different. Go and have a trip somewhere. And, so.
Yeah, so that was when you went to New York, is that right? You got on a plane to New York?
I the trip. My sister was going, and she said, meet me there. And so I went off on a bit of a trip to a few other places, and then met my sister in New York. And funny thing was, there was one guy in New York I knew who was a guitar player that used to play in my band, who had brought my ex-husband into my life. He was the person who brought him into the band, but he was living in New York and had been for 20 years or more. And I called him, and he said, oh, come, I'll take you out and show you around. And my mind was blowing at every little bar we walked into, the quality of music, the musicianship, the excitement of, oh, these are my mentors. I'm finally seeing them in tiny little bars. I got addicted to the place. And I went, so that was just 1 week. And I thought, I've got to come back. I must go back to New York. And I headed back to my school, which I was still running. I'd changed the name and done all of that, and I had teachers in place. And then got a call from a friend in Nashville, a very old friend, who said, come to Nashville, come over here and write some songs. And, we want to help you. We can't believe what's happened. All these friends that had moved and were living in other countries, they all just reached out to me like, holy crap. And they wanted to help me. So I went back. I went to Nashville. I did some songwriting, and then headed back to New York for a week. And then it just grew from there. It grew. I kept on going.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say too, like, you're going through all of that, and you've still got the responsibility of the school, even though you had people, working for you. It must have been so draining for you to have to try and keep going, when all you wanted to do, as you said, was just hide away, lie down, go away somewhere. So getting away to New York would have been, great, because it puts you in that, so much the Big Apple. I mean, every opportunity is over there, isn't it? And as you said, you saw the generosity of people. But I think that is also, for me, when I hear that, I think, well, you must be very special for people to be that way, because not, sometimes people will go, oh yeah, well, that's happened to them, poor them. But I think what you give out is what you get back. And, obviously you were surrounded by very loving and caring people, which was just what you needed at the time.
I definitely was, and I'm forever indebted to those people. But the thing about staying in the Blue Mountains was that even strangers, people I didn't know very well, if I went shopping, they'd say, oh, how are you? Are you okay? And they'd give me a hug. And it was like I couldn't move forward if I stayed there.
Yeah,
and
they wouldn't let you forget.
Yeah, even though they meant so well. But to my closest friends were obviously not that way, but just generally the community were like, oh, this poor woman, you know, like, and so to be in a place like New York where I knew not a soul except for this one guy, it was wonderful because I could just start my story again. I could be anything I wanted to be. It was fascinating. It was fascinating, you know, what happened.
And so from that, where, you know, you've written a memoir, a musical memoir about that, and I have listened to some of the songs that are in that. You've written a book which accompanies it as well, and it's so powerful and soulful. And you know, I encourage everyone out there to listen if they can to you, because you know, you're very talented in being able to write about your feelings and your experience. So tell me a little bit about how you came to do All These Pretty Things, which is the name of your one-woman show.
This is it
and the
here.
book. Yep.
It's well, I wanted to record the songs because I started writing as soon as, you know, what hit the fan. So I started writing, and I would just go to the piano in the Blue Mountains in my home in the middle of the night, because it was the only place I felt solace, was to sit at the piano and just create things. So I started writing very early on, and this show, All These Pretty Things, has had a few iterations. So this marriage really the breakup was around 2015. 14, 15 was when I felt something was happening. So in 17, March 2017, I did the show in the Blue Mountains Blues and Roots Festival. And it was the first iteration of the show. And it was not how it is now, as it was in the Edinburgh Fringe. It's been worked on and worked on and worked on. But to do that show the first time, it made me feel like there was something in it, because the Blues Festival is well attended, and I was in a room that's had about 100 seats, and the room was full, and people come from all over. It's not just local community. And my response there from people was, they wanted to talk to me after the show. A lot of people, they were like, man, that was amazing. Is it true? God, we hope it's not true, because it's horrific. And so I felt like people really, I don't know, they felt like they could be braver, or that they could cope with something they were going through. And I thought, yes, continue working on it. So that gave me the first, you know, flicker of, well, this is a good show, I should keep working on it. So then when I moved to New York, it's had many iterations. And then to get it to the book was after I'd recorded all the music. I finally had the songs. I recorded it in the pandemic with an amazing band, because New York, as you can imagine, is the mecca of jazz and music. I had my choice of the most incredible people. So my album, I'm so proud of it, and who played on it. It's just gorgeous playing. But anyway, so I recorded the songs in the pandemic, and the stories that I was writing, like tiny, like mini memoirs, like little fragments of memoirs. I wanted them to become more set, so that when I performed, I wasn't ad-libbing, because I can go off and just never know what I might say. So that I need to really formulate them. So then I started working with an editor and formulated the stories and got them down so they're in the book. And then I recorded all the stories. And so the book contains the download codes of the songs and the stories. And that happened in 2021, 22, 23. I came to Australia, and I toured it, and it went really well. Again, I had great response, and then came back and started reworking it again into a more condensed show, and working with directors and different people, and then finding my way to the right director who became my co-writer. Tessa Suto is her name. She's an English, she lives in New York, but she's from London, and she's a jazz singer, but an ex-journalist and fabulous writer. And we started co-writing and really formulating it into something, again, the next iteration. So that's what I took to Edinburgh, and she came with me. And as we were in Edinburgh for 2 weeks, every day something was changing in that show, because we were trying it out in front of audiences every day, which is why you go to Edinburgh. And we'd think, no, that line's not working, or that's not working, or somebody gave some feedback about that. So the show, it just keeps on, like, it's like it's got its own organic life, and it has to keep being fed and then growing. So that's what's going on. I've just come back. I'm 1 day back from that mega 1 month festival. Yeah.
Now, one of the songs that I was listening to was called Things, and I wondered if you could just talk to us about that, because one of the lines was about a wedding dress. What do I do with that? It's in tissue and that sort of thing. So I suppose that's something that happens when there's a breakup. What do you do with things? So is that how that song came about?
Yeah, that's exactly how it came about. I was faced with working out what to do with the home, and what to do with all of the stuff that we'd collected for years and years, and everything meant so much. We traveled to all sorts of places, as you know, Japan, and our homes were beautiful homes. The 2 homes we owned both appeared in Australian country style, like 8-page features. They were really lovely homes. We had a lot of wonderful collections of things, and we both had really good taste, if I can say that about myself. But they were gorgeous. So, and all of these things, they all meant something. They weren't just run out and furnish your house. They took a long time to get, a long time to save up for. To get a grand piano took me my whole life until I was nearly 50, before I could buy one, and to ship it back from Japan, and just, it all had such a lot of meaning. And then to have to be left with it, because he came like a whirlwind and took all his clothes and some pictures and what he thought he wanted. And I was left standing there in this house going, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Our wedding photos, our albums, our life, the stories you create with someone. It's really hard to be the one that's left to have to deal with it.
Yes.
He took off and started a new life.
Well, it's almost, well, it is the same as when your partner dies, or or someone close to you dies, and you have to go through all their belongings, and that you have to go through your life, and if it's a partner and you've been together, you don't want to clear out their clothes, you don't want to do this or that.
No.
So it's a grieving process that you have to go through as well.
Yeah. So there was a lot of counseling going on, therapy, long time, and all of that grieving. And in the show I actually say that divorce is like a death, like you just said. But you've got this added dimension, because you've been betrayed. You feel ashamed. You've been rejected. You've got all this added sting of, whereas when somebody dies, you can't go back. You can't negotiate. And someone walks away from you and they're still living. Oof.
Yes, that's very, there's so much involved with that you have to deal with. And as you say, all those feelings and your self-confidence, your self-esteem, everything, you just, goes, because you think, well, why did this happen? What's wrong with me? In perhaps what should have been what's wrong with him. But, you know, but it's also a way to, once you get through it, if, you know, if you can get through it, it's at least there's a new beginning. You can start again and try and do things on your terms as well, because you're doing what's right for you in this situation. So can we just talk a little bit about that? You went for counselling, but for listeners out there, I had another guest on a couple of weeks ago, and she's actually a friend, and she made the decision to leave a marriage after 40 odd years. And we were talking about that and the way people reacted and just how she coped with going through. This is something on the other side. So what did you do to get yourself, like, you know, you went away, you got back into the scene, you were writing your songs and that, but what are some ways that you can advise others on what they can do to try and get through this period?
I think one of the most important things for me was, I don't want to use cliches like, is to forgive the other person, because it sounds like such a cliche. But the most important thing for me was to let go of anger and animosity first, before I could even look at what could possibly come next. Because so many women and men who are deserted can never let go of that feeling of how much they hate the spouse for doing what they did to them. And for me, that was really important, was that I had to understand. And I think my years of meditation really helped me. It was like an incredible tool that I had sitting in the toolbox that I hadn't used it for a while, and I got it out and I cleaned it off and I went, okay, get deep into yourself. And I did a lot of meditation. I went to the 10-day silence retreats, and got to a point where I could be at peace with where I needed to go next and to let him go. It was that thing of learning that I don't have to forgive him and face him or anything and say, I forgive you. It's not about that. It's about being able to let go of it so that I could be free again. Because if I didn't feel free and not concerned about what he was doing, then I couldn't move forward. Then I'm stuck. So that was really the main thing for me, was to go, let him go, and just sit in it, cry, whatever you've got to do, just be in it, but let it go. That's his karma. He had that karma with that young girl, and I can't stand in the way of that. None of us can. If a husband or a wife is going to leave, well, it's some destiny that they've got with this other person, and we can't alter it.
No. And as you say, the meditation and that the way of life that you had for those 7 years when you sort of stepped out of the world, so to speak, would have come back to you and been a good base for you. And the thing is, it's so hard to let the anger go. It's hard to let go of anything really that's been with you. We find it hard to let go of certain limiting beliefs and things like that. But when you know those feelings you have when you've been betrayed, and you know, hate is such an intense emotion, but it does get to that point. And so a lot of people can't get past that, and so they're really just living out their lives, just going through the motions, and it doesn't have to be that way. You've shown that it doesn't have to be that way.
No, and lots of good friends around, and lots of laughing, you know, laughing at it as well. It's like,
that might take a bit of time to come, but yeah, I can
It does,
understand
but
that.
you just have, you look at it and you have these people around you. I had, like, as I said before, I had incredible people around me. One of my oldest friends that I used to live with when I was about 19 moved in. She was in between homes, and she came back and moved in with me, and we just ended up starting to slot back into this banter and this way that we used to be as young women, and laughing, and it was just fabulous, to lift the heaviness,
Yes.
to get it out, to realize that this happens to so many people in so many different ways, and we're not alone, and we can have another life. I was 55 in 2015, so there I was, right in the middle, or whatever you call it, and he's gone with someone who's 18, 19. I'm middle-aged, and like, what am I going to do? Well, it was really, all the odds were stacked against me of, how can I start a life again? To come here and to come to New York and to actually get a visa. I had to get a visa to live here. That was really, it was hard work. I thought, oh, well, I'll try. But if I don't get it, I'll stay in Australia. But I got this artist visa, and I was just amazed at the process and the steps and how they unfolded. It was like a door opened, and then there was another door over there, and then that one opened, and that one opened, and I was meant to just keep walking, just keep going, keep
moving
walking,
forward.
keep going. Yeah.
So how do you feel? Oh, well, I mean, you've done the show a number of times, and as you say, it evolves and changes. How do you feel now when you're performing? In the beginning, I would think it would have been quite raw. What
Yeah.
about now when you're performing the song?
Look, it can still be raw. It can still be raw. It's not so raw about the actual love that he and I had. And sometimes that's even raw, because the songs are really, there's a couple of new songs, and they're really deep into when we were really in love, because we were. So I can sometimes get this, I can feel it welling up in me. But there's also a section in the show where my father also died during the time of, my mum had passed away a year before he left me. And then during the divorce proceedings and him taking me to court, my father passed away. So in the show, when I get to that bit, it can be, and I'm especially if I hear someone in the audience crying, because some people can't, people always cry at the story and the song about my dad. So I can still get a little bit emotional myself when I'm performing it. And I said to my director when I was there, am I insane? Why am I doing this? Am I trying to hold myself back for some reason in these feelings? And every night I'd go to the show, and somebody would walk up afterwards, and I've got all the testimonials on the iPhone, and they'd hold my hand, or they'd hug me, and they'd go, "You're so brave, and thank you for sharing this. It's so important. I can't tell you how good it makes me feel to know that." And I don't just mean women, it was men as well. Men were coming and, hugging me and saying, "Oh, thank you so much." So then I knew, no, I'm not doing it to hold myself back. I'm doing it because it's affecting people.
Yes, and it's your experience, and I would think, when you've been through something, it's a much more powerful thing when you've been through it, rather than just picking up any song or whatever. You've lived it.
Representing
So
someone
there's
else.
yeah. So what's ahead? Oh, well, first of all, we're coming towards the end of the interview, but a couple of things. All These Pretty Things, why did you call it that?
Well, a friend of mine named it that. A friend I was working with. Yeah, I was workshopping my story with her, Karen Jacobson. She lives up in Queensland too. She's the voice of Siri. She was
Oh,
living, she's the Australian voice. She's a fabulous motivator. She's a really incredible person and a great singer-songwriter. So she and I were both working on one-woman shows, and she was living here in Hell's Kitchen. And the song Things was a part of the show for a long time. And as we would workshop, she'd go, well, I feel like this is the main song of the show. And a good name would be All These Pretty Things. And I'm like, you're right. So I took the name and we used it. So
oh,
because
great.
when it comes down to it, it is about, you said it's letting go. Well, it's not just letting go of the person, it's letting go of the life, the house, the clothes, the chairs, the books, the tables, the dinner sets, the cutlery, everything. It's letting go. You even have to let go of your friends, your family, because you want to move forward into a new life, and you have to. So all these pretty things, it's, really.
Yeah. Now that's very aptly named. Now what's in the future for you now? You've just come back from the Fringe Festival, and what's next? Are you going to bring the show back out to Australia?
I'd really like to bring it back to Australia. I met the Adelaide Fringe people while I was there, so I'm hoping that may be an option. And festivals will be great in Australia. The Fringe experience opened some doors for me, and they're the things as soon as I feel like my feet are back on the ground, because I just got back last night, I go through all of the things I collected while I was there, because they have delegates that come. They have publicity people, press people, and delegates from festivals that come to the Ed Fringe. And I met many of those across Europe, from America and Australia. And that's what I'm hoping is the future for this show, is that I will tour it. I will continue to play the role and tour it in different parts of the world, bring it back to Australia, take it to Europe, and maybe even develop it further into a screenplay. That's an idea for the co-writer right now. She wants to go to a retreat and turn it into maybe Netflix series.
I was thinking about that. So lots of opportunities for you.
Yeah.
Now, before we go, Tracy, I do have a question that I ask all of my guests. So I'm just going to ask you that now. And that is, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
Well, to me, it means that I go to bed at night and I close my eyes and I fall asleep without a worry in the world. And when I wake up in the morning, I open my eyes and I see my dog, I see my room, and I'm inspired. I want to get up, I want to get dressed, walk out my door and go into the world and interact with people. That's what living well means to me in a really simplistic way, is that I have a sense of I'm okay in my skin.
That's wonderful. And I certainly admire you, Tracy, having read your story and listened to your work, and now spoken to you for 40 odd minutes. I really admire your strength and your courage, and I thank you for coming on the show today, because I know that there will be a lot of women out there who'll take strength from your experience, and perhaps not only those who were in exactly the same situation, just the way you've handled a traumatic experience in your life, something that's come more or less out of the blue, how you have handled that. And that can be anything in our lives. You've got that inner strength that you've been able to draw on, and that resilience, and I certainly do admire you for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for joining me today. And I will be sharing all the links in the show notes, and I'll encourage the readers to find your book and also listen to your work. And I do hope that you come out to Australia again. And, you know, it's just been a lovely conversation that we've had today and very inspiring.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's been the same for me to talk to you. Thank you.
Well, what an inspiring woman Tracy Yarad is. What she went through, other women have gone through it as well, but such a traumatic time in her life, and the positivity that has come out of that. She's been able to realize her passions in the music area of her life, and also in writing her musical memoir, All These Pretty Things. So I hope you've enjoyed the episode today, and be sure to check out her book and her videos of her performing. And I'd love you to share the episode with a friend, because I know that they will benefit from just some of the life experiences that Tracy has shared today. So that's it for this episode, but until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.